No, no, but I'm excited to see this get wrapped up.
How's this?
I think you did fix it there.
I think I did fix it. Yeah. All right. Well, that was. This has been a real comedy of errors, actually. Yes. Matt Naputin says also as a potential customer, I really think releasing something like a rigging course would be a good marketing strategy. And it would be. And we'd really like to do that. We kind of thought these streams were gonna maybe become that, but it's become fairly. One second. It's become fairly clear that doing these sort of ad hoc doesn't make a very good course, you know? Yeah, sitting down and actually doing like, here's how you'd rig a full character would be sort of the ideal thing to do. And the main break that we have on like getting that out is time, basically. Um, but to now, because apparently nobody could hear anything I previously said. um, let me just say again. So here's what's going on here. Mostly everything's working. It turns out, however, I think I am in the wrong Git branch, actually, and a couple of things that I thought were working are not. So I went back to fix a couple of things that needed to be fixed, rather than trying to disentangle any of that, on stream. And so, we'll still, I think, be able to finish this character pretty quickly. Um, Matt says, I have a hard time learning from this, especially as an animator who just wants to rake his characters. Yeah, very understandable. Part of the reason why we want to go for uh the body plan approach is to make it more approachable, but what you're seeing here, which is essentially seeing me create the body plan approach, right? That's not necessarily going to be as helpful. That's sort of more of a rigor facing thing. But what we are hoping is that what this will turn into is that'll be what once it's actually part of the application. Like, you won't, all the stuff that you've seen me do with like having to like fix various issues as I went along, right? The user would not have to do that, right? By the time this actually gets released, it'll be thoroughly tested, and you wouldn't see like silly little errors like that, right? Um, so the intent is that you would like what I'm doing right now with the weight painting. This is the sort of thing that you would have to do, but this should be much more straightforward than say dealing with the componentized system itself. From the user's point of view, it should be just like, I load in a body plan, I press some buttons, and it goes.
Yeah, and I think that what would really make sense is that when we do release the body plans, we should release some companion videos to
That's
that that
right.
are that are a little more organized in their presentation than the streams, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Or
Like, I feel
create
like the streams, like, we kind of had an idea about how this was going to go, and you maybe have gotten a sense of this from watching some of the streams. It didn't completely. It was difficult for me to organize them effectively, basically. Um, Largely because I just have, a lot of calls on my time, and therefore, I'd be, as I did today, like entering a stream without really sufficient, preparation.
Well, it's also just hard without a script. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, it is.
scripted stuff tends to be a lot more concise. It also takes an awful lot longer to make
It
scripted
does.
content.
This has sort of been the problem. Um, but I will just like I'll get back to that in a second. I'll just note the reason here why I went over to the right leg and painted some of that in is because when you mirror, if you have no values there, you won't get anything particularly useful out of the mirroring. The values don't necessarily have to be perfect, but you need some blend over that area. Even though I'm not really worried about this too much, I am just going to mirror over it. But what I was about to say, you're learning Python. Matt says, I'm learning Python to do these pro moves you do. I absolutely advocate, like, it's really helpful to know some scripting. But I also actually feel very much that uh, artists shouldn't necessarily have to, right? Anyone who is doing something where they are a dedicated rigger, you really, really, really should know Python. Like, that's actually really important. If what you want to do, though, is to be able to do the kind of thing that we're eventually targeting the componentized system at, like you pop uh, you pop a body plan into your character, you paint some weights, and your character's basically ready. I don't feel like artists necessarily should have to learn Python to do that. And one of the things that I should make very clear here, because it might be unclear, given that we've been doing the componentized stuff for like months and months and months now on stream, that the workflow that I'm doing here, showing how you'd construct this system, is not how you'd actually interact with it as a user necessarily.
Right.
Um, Yeah.
However, if you are a professional rigger and you want to
Oh,
be able
yes.
to make your own modular systems, this is what you would do. And this is, I
Exactly.
think, who this is targeted to. I do think, though, that knowing some Python is very useful if you're an artist. If you do not work in a situation where you have professional riggers available to you to serve your needs, though, right? Because you're going to have some needs that go beyond what anybody's going to be able to provide for you out of the box.
This is true. It is a very helpful thing. It's very nice. Yep. One moment. I just want to check and see why this is happening. Probably for a very similar reason as the arm. No, that's not the case. We weren't seeing any, like, really strange values in there. Let me just take a look at this for a second. And now we're getting kind of a strange... Yeah, we do have something that's like 180 degrees. So you know where we're figuring out the twist? What I'm thinking is a little weird is that I'm not seeing any, like, really weird values in here. But let's check the next... Oh ho! Here we go! Yup. Okay. So we do have an issue similar to the one we encountered last time on the shoulder. We have a similar issue on the leg. Although interestingly, this one shows up. Well, actually, let me double check something here. I actually have a theory about what's going on here. No, that side is actually set to left in the left leg. Basically, what's happening here is that something about how the guides are positioned is giving a 180-degree twist over here. And Contour is actually so good at handling twist that it actually successfully manages that right up until it goes straight past the 180-degree like angle, right, where it can't. So which is actually very impressive, except for the part where you still don't want it. So I'm going to go back into the leg and fix that. And it almost certainly has to do with the way that this one is being aimed. Because if we take a look at, I don't need to see the shapes here. It means that, yeah, let's take a look. So this is X, Z, Y. And this one is X, Y, Z. Right, Z is pointing backwards. It's an incorrect direction. It's very clear what's going on here. Let's take a look at how this aim is being done. We have this. It's object rotation up. And the object we're using is all, which makes perfect sense. Basically what that means is... I see what's going on here. Basically what that means is it is using this all node as essentially a way of getting an up vector, right? So that it's taking like the forward Z and using forward Z. Of course, forward Z is actually incorrect in this case. This should be negative Z. And it possibly should be even if the leg was reversed. So let me just break this connection and flip it back the other way. So now it's using negative Z. And let's see what it does. Now it's going to mangle the if we just pop right back over to the other file, it is going to mangle the mesh for a moment. As you can see, but we can just reset that stuff by entering and leaving rebind mode. There you go. Resets all the bind data. And now, let's see how this works. That's much better. Yeah, there we go. Still a few things here I want to clean up, but like basically behaving as one would hope. Thing number one I want to clean up. Note how this twist is all happening right up in here. That looks like crap. We have a way around that, and we want to go and fix it in the leg itself. Which is to say, this should have inherit twist on. And that basically just fixed it. And of course, we have now fixed it for the other side too. Although, like I said, we'll see if that vector of -1 is actually the correct thing for the other side. It may or may not be, and we can deal with it if it isn't. Matt Nepotin says, another idea for marketing would be offering some free rigs for animators. I see so many advanced skeleton rigs on Gumroad, and that is how I learned about it. Yeah, we do offer one rig for animators, which is actually the same one I grabbed this mesh from, and you can get that on our site. And we should probably throw it up on some other sites. We did have some plans to make a lot of other rigs to sort of like throw out there to the community. Unfortunately, we again ran into time constraints. But that is absolutely something we should do more. You're absolutely right about that. All right, so that's all working. Let's take a look at the other leg. See what it's doing. This might all just work now, or it might very much not all just work now. Nope. That actually was the correct thing for both legs, which I was sort of hoping would be the case, but you know, one's hopes do not always I don't know. There's probably some quote in there. I just did something very silly. You see what happened here? The rig was already in a different state when I hit rebind mode. So now, of course, it's rebound this way. That's okay. We can fix that. Well, actually, the real way to do it, I don't know. Like, you don't have to. You do it in any order, really. But the most obvious way to do it, because then you can see when things are lined up again, is to enter rebind mode, make your change, then leave rebind mode. That's how it's really intended to be used. Matt also says, if I can figure out how to use this, I'll make some. But right now I have no idea how to make a hand or how to rig the face. For the face, I would probably just use blend shapes plus advanced skeleton. Yeah, you're basically, you know, it does not... Contour certainly has some use for faces, but it is not currently targeted specifically at facial stuff. In terms of how to make a hand, that should be something that is pretty straightforward in that it's all just basically... Actually, a hand's one of the simplest things you can do, in that it is just a bunch of chains inside fingers. However, once we get version 1.1 out, you would be able to just use the system that I have here, right? Without having to deal with its internal stuff. And that would include having fingers that you can just use. So that is certainly
I will say,
an option.
For a hand, for the most part, if you put joint chains down in each of the fingers and then just do a little bit of painting to paint the difference between them, you typically get a pretty usable hand.
Yeah.
Essentially just by doing that.
Indeed. That is exactly how hands work, and usually there's very little work involved in actually doing them. Hands one of the easiest things you can do with contour, actually, because you don't usually, it depends on the hand. I mean, some hand rigs do use IK actually, but usually you don't have to. They're straight FK, and that means in contours terms, that's literally just like you draw some bones in and you paint some weights to separate them from each other, and that's all you have to do. So hands are super easy. I'm gonna fix that toe thing in a second. What am I doing? Like I said, like decades of reflex. This is not where the paint weights tool is. There we go. Let's paint it so that all of this stuff ends up going to the foot. Because remember, like, one of the things that you may recall from earlier streams and discussions of how that works is that when you are doing feet like this, when you're doing something that's at kind of like a 90-degree angle, you usually use two chains for that, because otherwise, since it's using closest point to figure out how to associate the mesh with the curve, it can get confused. I mean, confused is the wrong term, right? Like, the closest point could be something that isn't the one that you want. And so usually, we'll break that into two different chains, which is why I'm painting the foot separately. Matt also says, that would be nice, as I just want to keep it easy. I returned to this because I tried to skin a character rig with advanced skeleton, and it stressed me out like doing calculus. Yes, well, that is why skinning sucks, right? Like, that is why we are trying to make it better. But I think that your overall point, basically, which is a very well taken point, is that there's a lot of things that we could be doing to improve the awareness of our tools that we aren't really doing right now. And that is absolutely, and you're absolutely right. That is sort of the direction we want to take things, because we are a very, very tiny company, and because we're working on a lot of things at once, and some of which we cannot announce yet, but we're very excited about. The amount of effort that we've spent on this has been somewhat limited, and that is not ideal. These streams originally were something more of a marketing thing, but they've turned into more something about sort of like rigging technique, which I think is actually really cool and probably useful for a lot of people. But, they aren't really serving the purpose that we were originally imagining that they would. And so, yeah, there's absolutely a lot of work that we need to do on that. But regardless, let me just, paint this in. Because while painting this stuff is like kind of obnoxious, like in an ideal world, right? We're not there yet. In an ideal world, you'd paint nothing at all, right? That'd be great. But that's not the world we live in. Yeah, that looks a little better. Doing stuff like this and being like, yeah, no, radius is going to be 10, and then seeing it affect the curvature, like, for instance, like, so much easier, like, than trying to actually control this with either weighting or PSDs or any of the other methods. It is so much easier to get good results with contouring. And I've seen that pretty, yeah.
Yeah, speaking of things where time is a little bit of a constraint, one thing that I do wish that I had the time to do, but that there are other things that are higher priority than, is to actually sit down and really devote some work to generating better automatic weights. Because I really think that that's an area where there's room for an awful lot of improvement. I think you could probably come up with something that works very well for that. But I think it would also be quite a bit of work.
Yeah, and there are algorithms that do currently exist, and we've considered like doing like geodesic voxel weighting, like Maya does, right? And that would be helpful, but it wouldn't really, like, even geodesic voxel, it'd be better than what we have now, and maybe we should actually start with something like that where there's like a known existing algorithm when we get to that. But in the meantime, like, we're doing this pretty simple auto weighting because at least the weight painting is much less onerous than normal. All right. We have working foot weights. I mean, here's the thing, like this has been like a little time consuming because, because it's something still under development in some ways, and because I screwed it up, like half of it was my own damn fault, right? And so like we're kind of going around in a circle. But actually, if you imagine that, like, because you're using these components, you get the character into place, everything into place rather easily. Look how fast I have just like put together a character. Well, I mean, I have to deal with the torso now, but put together a character. Let me switch out of component mode. Different use of the term component. Like the degree to which I have just done this character's deformation more or less from scratch, right? Literally from scratch, like unthinkable in a conventional weighting context.
And Matt's saying, I saw one guy trying to use AI for skinning. It was called Skinner. And yeah, I think that there are some machine learning approaches that might actually be pretty fruitful for that kind of stuff. I also think there are some approaches probably that don't involve machine learning, but that also might do a very good job at least most of the time. I think it's one of those things where there are some approaches that don't seem that incredibly difficult to me that probably get you a good result like 90% of the time. And then 10% of the time, it doesn't quite fit.
All right, right, exactly. And so the other thing I would say about using AI for skinning, I actually think that's probably a pretty smart idea. But the thing that Contour is meant to solve is the fact that the result you actually want, I mean, this is sort of the way you often say it, Tagore, right? The result you actually want is not in the space of linear blend skinning.
Right, the solution space.
The solution space.
Right.
Like, it's literally not there. If you want linear blend scaling to look good, it's possible, but you need to add either additional joints, or you need to use PSDs, or you need to do something to sort of deal with it better. And while dual quaternion kind of helps a bit, right? Like, it's better than just linear. It doesn't really help that much, right? You still have a lot of issues with probably needing to use PSDs or additional joints or a variety of other techniques to sort of solve the issue. So even if you got like good weights automatically, which would be great, it's not a full solution to essentially the problem of dealing with skinning, like weights themselves, like in an ideal world, like I've said, like if we had the time to figure this out, like I would want to just get rid of weight painting completely. I mean, we both would, right? It's not a good technique. I have a whole rant that I even snipped out on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, about how bad a concept weight painting is, basically. And there are a variety of ways that people have tried to tackle this problem, and none of them really deal with the inherent issues of the inherent issues of having like what I think of as the wrong primitive for your deformation. That you're just like regular old normal joint is not actually a very good primitive for this purpose. And you can't deal with that issue without dealing with the problem of deformation itself, and like the fact that linear blend skinning just kind of isn't very good. Right, so I'm gonna mirror these. Yeah, let's not click that. I mean, actually, it wouldn't do anything bad in this particular case, but mirror. Those ones already have weights that are correct, but these ones need to be mirrored. Okay, so this foot should now have the same deformation, other than the fact that the pole vector is in a weird place. It basically does. Yep, that's all looking good. There we go. Looks like we probably will have time to do fingers, actually, which is quite nice. Oh, well, actually, I got to deal with these, so maybe not. We'll see. Yep, ignoring the face for the moment. One issue that we encounter here is actually, speaking of linear blend weighting, right? Here's one case where we actually need something rigid, which is why we have rigid influences in addition to the spline influences. Because it's not like having the concept of a rigid influence, the concept of a single transform that is part of your weighting, is actually a bad idea. It's just that it really should be only one primitive out of many, and probably not the most useful, right? Sometimes it actually is the right thing. In this particular case, it would be, because of course we need to make this area with his skull, like this actually has to be rigid, right? So the way that we deal with that is, let's throw on a locator. Now here's something that, for instance, is disallowed in the more comprehensive componentized rigging system I made for TTF, but which I think is allowed in our system here that we're doing for Contour, which is that I can parent this locator directly to the head. The reason why we don't want to do that in the more advanced componentized system that I did for them is because doing so would ascend, like we want in that case to be extremely strict about inputs and outputs running through the inputs and outputs nodes, because we want to write a bunch of other tools that surround the system that can just always make that assumption. In this case, we're not trying to do that, and we want to make it as simple for the user as possible. We don't want to have to constantly be to the user the way we do this internally, right? But the only people using the system are specifically people who are professional riggers, which is that we're like, don't parent anything. Maya won't stop you from doing it, but it's bad because it like breaks the assumptions of the system. To do that to like all the users we're talking to, though, or like we want to sell this to, I mean, that's I think that's asking a bit much, and I don't think it's absolutely necessary. What that does mean, though, is that all of your outputs from the component And I should note, Matt, by the way, that what I am talking about here, this is all stuff where if you purely are really dealing with this at an artist level, you really shouldn't have to care about this. But part of this componentized stream has turned into like kind of a deep dive on rigging techniques, so I do want to sort of address this. Which is that it actually doesn't, assuming that the rules of your system are not all inputs and outputs must go through input and output nodes, then this is kind of okay. What it means is, though, that your outputs, this is essentially a different form of output. And therefore, your outputs are kind of spread around among different things, which if you're going to do something internally at a studio and you want to be able to write more tools making a set of, like, these set of assumptions, like, that kind of sucks and you don't want to do that. It's just going to make everything more complicated. Whereas if you're presenting something to a user and you don't want them to have to follow some arcane rules all the time, then it makes sense, I think, to allow it and say, yeah, this component can actually have a bunch of different kinds of outputs, and that is something that makes it less flexible, but I think it's the correct trade-off. Anyway, let's bind it to the head. We want to add an influence. And actually, in addition to doing that, let's actually just make this stuff follow it. Now, at least for the moment, I'm not deforming the face at all. So I'm actually going to just, I'm not even going to bother using something contour-like because it wouldn't really make any difference. I'm just going to use a cluster. Just like, in this case, it doesn't make any difference. No, apparently I selected the wrong tool. That was not what I meant to do. This is what I meant to do. I was not trying to paint cluster weights. And I can just parent that to this. And you can clearly see the issue, right? This is getting the contour deformation, and most of the time, if this is happening at an elbow, that, like, nice deformation is exactly what you want, right? But in this case, you know, this stuff is pretty purely rigid, but you're getting the deformation in the neck that's sort of sliding around. You don't want that, right? So, let's fix that. Why are you not? Oh, possibly? No. What is going on here? Maybe I have the wrong thing selected? Why are you not presenting me with my painting interface here? In paint mode. Give me a second. This is why people practice demos, if this was actually meant as a demo. Right? What did I do here? Well, nothing that I can see that seems wrong. Just make sure I didn't, let's just take a look at the script editor for a second. No, there weren't really any issues. I am going to restart Maya for a second and just see what happens. There we go. That was some real bizarre behavior there, probably on Maya's part. Yeah, there we go. Maya is sometimes, you know, has some pitfalls. And of course, this is our own plugin, but we are building it on top of Maya's stuff. Like, as you can see, the UI is using all kinds of, like, you know, Maya elements to it, and it's based off of Maya's wave painting UI, and sometimes things just don't go the way that you think that they're going to go. And actually, I really should just... Actually, what I really should do is just do this. There we go. There we go. And here, again, I can just like run it over the white area if I want to. Contour will not let me screw it up. I do really, really like that because it is one of just the like perennial issues with weight painting. It's always painful. All right, I think that'll work. Well, that's all working. And again, not results you could easily get with conventional methods, certainly not this fast, right? Are we in bind pose? Yeah, we are. All right, where are we at this point? That's looking pretty good. I mean, I do think I need to adjust the weights a bit in his neck area. Now, for the version that we actually released of this character, we actually do some sort of muscly stuff on top. I'm not really going to show that this time because that's not what this is about. But, you know, it's one possible answer to the question of, like, what do you do up here, you know? Where we draw contour chains that basically act as sort of like a nice, simple like pseudo muscle system. I mean, it's not, you know, actual sim, but it gets you some nice deformation for very little effort. Kind of feel like it should go away completely at this point. Yeah, there we go. It's more like it. All right. Yeah, better. Okay. So I believe that at this point, you know, fingers aside, which we can choose to add later if we want to, like, yeah, the body is basically done. Or I should say the top part of the body, the torso, is basically done. Just leaving one on FK and one on IK so I see them both together. You know, could be improved in a variety of ways, but on the other hand, for what was, you know, very little work, this you know, gets us very, very far. All right, so last bits that we need to do before we could actually call this a working full complete rig is I need to fix those issues with the toes, and I need to fix these things here. Now, what was going on with those things, as you may recall from a previous stream, is that they are using contour deform field constraints, and that the way we had set it up previously is that those deform field constraints were themselves like having their matrices driven by the you know, so by inputs coming in through the inputs node, which is the correct way to do it with components. However, and the reason why you're not seeing that here is my own damn fault for basically, screwing it up and being in the wrong branch. What I think I'm going to do for this stream, it kind of sucks because that means that what I'm showing you here is a little bit of a missing aspect of the system, but I want to I think I am just going to go create that because I've shown in a previous stream, I've shown the thing working. I've shown the data flowing through the system. And I kind of want to get a character that actually works out of this, like on stream today. So I'm going to go do it manually with the understanding that if I hadn't been an idiot, this would all have worked normally. And we already saw it doing so. So just sort of pretend that it is. The toes I'll actually fix on stream because that should be really easy. And this one isn't difficult conceptually. It's just like you got to hook a bunch of stuff up. So I'm just going to manually do it. This breaks the system. It's not how you would actually choose to do things in reality. But for demonstration purposes, hopefully people can sort of put one and one together from previous streams and be like, oh yeah, this is how it actually works. I do sort of apologize for that though. That was a function of me being distracted and doing 10 different things at the same time. Anyway, right. Tools. Come on. There we go. Deform field constraint. And deform field constraint. And now it actually goes together correctly, except for one thing. It actually does not go together correctly. Why not? That should not be happening. And this is why this is not working properly. And this is why this would work properly if I was actually, sending data through the system the way I'm supposed to be. Here's what's going on there. Helps to kind of have a sense of that. Here's what's going on there. So basically, previously, that system doesn't just control the position of these things. Because keep in mind that the guides, we're always looking at the guides. We're always looking at the inputs coming in from the guides, right? To figure out what, for instance, the length of bones should be. Well, this bone does not have that information, right? So, what had previously just sort of, flowed through the system is now, not doing so. So let me actually just take a quick look at this, which is probably the right thing to do anyway, and see if I can make the thing actually work properly. Let's get rid of the deform field constraint here. Let's see if this one, did I undo that and it's not there anymore? No, for some reason that didn't go. Oh, right. I just deleted. No, that should have been fine actually. What just happened here? Right, this one has a deform field constraint. I'm going to delete it. That's unfortunate. Let's see if I can rebind that. 1 second. Yeah. We are seeing something here that is not great. Let me just take a look at what this is doing. Well, let's oh, I think I see maybe what happened here. Because it does have its inputs coming in from right, it's the spine that was the issue, not the leg. Okay, this explains a lot. But this actually kind of makes sense. Let me just take a look at the weights for a second. Yep, it just there were weights in there that I didn't see. The actual behavior of the system is actually behaving correctly. It's just not, because currently those things are not moving, which is exactly what you would expect. Got to fix this. The reason why we couldn't see that before is when it was moving with the body, the problem wasn't evident. So that error message doesn't seem to have done anything particularly harmful. We probably should take a look at it. But it's not actually that much of an issue, but the actual issue here is weights. Because as we can see, the deformation is still behaving properly. Yep. Yeah, that is the actual behavior you would expect. Deformation doesn't look as nice though, right? As we want it to, because you're seeing these weird bumps. So here's what seems to be going on. So the leg, the sort of threading through that we did previously, we are going to have to recreate that actually, because now I remember how this works, right? Which is that this control doesn't actually get constrained. It's actually just receiving this, what am I saying, control, this joint socket, right? This joint, basically, in the normal sense, doesn't actually get constrained, right? It's receiving data from the inputs. The inputs have to receive data from the spine. Now, what I suspect I actually did is I have an old spine in here. So let me just take a look at that. What do I have for the spine inputs? Yeah. Note that there is nothing here that is actually being like it doesn't have any inputs for those like constraint points, which it is actually supposed to. Oh no. Is that no, that's the pelvis overshoot. That is definitely not it. And so we had previously set up something where we had locators at these two locations. They were constrained inside the spine, and then, you know, they would then propagate their information over, because we had outputs for them. Currently, we do not have outputs for them, and this is why this isn't actually working properly. So, do I want to just manually do that again? Do I have time to do that real quick? Because it's pretty important actually. Give me a second to think about how I want to approach this. Do I want to fake it or do I want to do it for real? Yeah, let's do it for real. We have half an hour. Fixing the toes should be easy. Let's actually just fix the toes first. Then we can sort of do this. Right, so leg. So the issue here is that, as you may note, like if we are looking at this right here, right, this the end of the chain, it's not following along. And the reason why it's not following along is, I mean, I guess it was never set up to. Let's see what this stuff is actually hooked up to. Here's the toe control. The ball control has the aim control, and like control is exactly what it should do. The toe control does not have one. Likely, there's nothing actually aiming this joint. I just kind of forgot to do that, apparently. Indeed, there is not. It is not actually being pointed at anything. So this would be very easy to fix. All I need to do is this. What am I doing? I need to create a contour aim. Why doesn't it like that? Ah, I see what the problem is. It does not like the fact that for some reason... Ah, yes, I went and locked a bunch of stuff, which means that it can't create that yet. We need to unlock... This is what comes from doing this in a weird order. We need to unlock override rotation. Yeah, here we go. It'll be in here somewhere. Yeah, override blend. And override enabled means something completely different. There we go. But then we need to lock them again. Actually, it'll automatically lock them again. There we go. Here's an aim handle. you're going to take the aim control and put it under the toe, which will now, yep, that'll work properly. And now the other thing that we need to do is to make sure that this will blend off, like the override blend. And actually the aim control is actually wired up to do that, at least for the moment, right? This isn't actually the most efficient way to do it in terms of like how parallel eval works and stuff, but I'm going to just do it for the moment, which is that I'm going to hook up the appropriate values to the blend. I wonder if that's actually what I did over here. Yeah, it turns out that it actually is. I should, that is not actually the most optimal way to do this, but in this case it probably doesn't really matter. I want to do the same thing here. Getting the inputs, but it needs to actually be the plugs equals true. We'll turn that into second item in the selection, or plug it into second item in the selection dot blend. And so now this is the important bit that I wanted to make sure worked, right? Like if we turn IK off, then this will still, oh wait, I selected the wrong thing. Yeah, there we go. This will work properly with IK off. It needed to make sure it was blending to FK appropriately, which it now is. All right. So that whole toe issue should now be fixed. Now let me actually just double check on that in the oh, wrong one. There we go. Yep, that's what I wanted to see. Now, let's see. Standard biped, what was I doing? Sometimes I lose my train of thought. Right, we got to deal with those things there. All right. I am going to go ahead and re-implement that because I think it will take very little time. It's very unfortunate, like it's very silly, but like I said, A, it's my own fault. B, I would really like to show this working, and I made some changes to the spine itself that are actually pretty important subsequent to, I think, being in the wrong branch, which is a really unfortunate thing to have done. Yeah, so we need some additional inputs. Or is that actually true? 1 second. Let me just check on something. Yeah, I'm not going to sort this out. I'm just going to re-implement it, which will not take very long. All right. We need some inputs. Or actually, I don't even need the node editor for this. I just need to add additional inputs. I'm about to get rid of these, so I won't actually name them right now. Let's see. Let's put this under the anchor. Let's actually duplicate them because I will need 2 of these. So this one's going to be left leg. What do I want to call this? Left leg constrained, right leg constrained. I may decide to change the names for these later. I'm just going to put them as this for the moment because it seems convenient to me. And actually, let me just see. Yeah. Right, I am actually going to, because of the fact that we already have the form field in the other system for the moment, like, and this would not be true if we had done this in a different order. I'm going to actually make the constraint in the body plan, but what I do need to do is to hook it up to its outputs here. Oh, right. Let me just add some useful outputs first. Grab the world matrices. That's left, yeah. Yeah, and I think this is all I should need, actually, to sort of jury-rig this a little bit. What? Oh, I bet I know what's going on here. It may be hooking up the wrong things now that I changed. That's actually, it really shouldn't work that way. Let me just take a quick look at this. So for instance, let's take a look at the anchor of the left leg. Or rather, let's take a look at the inputs of the left leg and see what's hooked up to the anchor. Nope, that is actually correct. It did not screw that up. So what in the world is it doing now? All right. I really thought it was probably the anchor that was wrong. Conceivably, Oh, I have a theory. Huh. Uh-huh. Okay, I think I see what's going on here. Because... well, let's see if this is actually true. No, it's not. So... we have hip overshoot. Let's see what hip overshoot is being plugged into. Ah, okay. This is what I expected. You see, it so happens I named it exactly the same thing the last time I did this, and only the spine was wrong. So, even though this now has incorrect data, it immediately went, oh, that must be the thing that you're actually using, right? And hooked it back up for me. because these references, as they should, keep some records of like what's hooked up to what. I introduced clearly I named it the exact same thing, right? I introduced an attribute that was named exactly the same thing, and it went and hooked it up for me. Of course, right now there's no good data flowing into that attribute, right? Like, it's not doing anything useful. So that is why this happened to the legs. And it's very unfortunate, but also rather easy to fix, I think. So, so thing number one is I need to make sure I know, like, where right leg constraint is. Yeah, okay, so, like, it didn't travel around with anything. This you can see the issue here, right? It is not putting anything into a useful spot. And it is also, like, its orientation's wrong. Like, everything's wrong, right? But here's what we can do. And this would all be happening if I had run through properly and did it in the proper order. This would be happening in the file itself. But this is a fairly non-invasive way to just introduce it back to this rig with the data flowing through properly. So what I need to do is to make sure that I'm getting the correct input for my spine component, because it is supposed to have inputs. Did I name this the same way, and did it automatically hook it back up for me? Yes, it did. It hooked up the. So apparently, I literally like apparently I'm a robot, right? I always name things the same thing, apparently, because now this is hooked up properly, but it's not propagating its information inside the spine because there's no reason for it to do so yet. We haven't told it to, right? So here's what we can do. Let's take our, let's see, it should be under the spine anchor. Yes, here's left leg constrained and right leg constrained. They both need to be deform field constrained. And now we need to run the information we're getting from the inputs on the spine through to that sort of to those constraints. Yeah. Because they both have a matrix in, and they need to be getting their matrix, the thing that defines what their relationship to the spine actually is and how they get transformed. They need to be getting that from the spine's inputs. One of the things that leads me to believe that A, rigging is programming, and B, the way that rigging does programming is dumb, is stuff like this. This one, yeah, which one is this? Is this the left? That's the left one. That is to say, there's a bunch of complicated interrelationships between these things. I have them in my head, but there's no good way currently to sort of lay them out, right? You have to have a mental map of it, which is often true when you're doing like regular programming too, right? But there aren't a lot of tools in Maya at any rate. Control rig would be different in this regard. Control rig would make this much clearer. But in Maya, there aren't a lot of ways to sort of fundamentally have clarity be part of the structure of your rig. No tool, like we've said, no tools for abstraction. And that's very frustrating. And now this all works properly, right? Everything is, wait, no it doesn't. 1 second. And you can still see those things moving around. Give me a moment to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to some degree, for the things that rig tools does for you, it was a design goal of ours to have rig tools to have as much of its behavior as possible be visible.
Indeed.
And I think it does a pretty good job of that, but of course it doesn't help with sort of the rest of things hidden away in the scene graph.
Yep. Let me just take a quick look at something here. Those are actually rather large. Because, as you can see, the issue that we're having here, right, is that these things diverge. Which is, clearly wrong. They should not be diverging. And I would have thought that plugging these into the inputs, let's just make sure that that's actually happening correctly on the leg. So the leg's inputs, its hip overshoot is coming from the spine outputs, just as it should. That's right leg overshoot. And right leg overshoot is coming from right leg constrained. So, why is it not? Because we've seen this work properly before, I'm pretty sure. Because it would change the distance because, it's not going to maintain the length. Ah, that's true. It's not going to maintain the length of the bone, and there's no reason why it would. Well, that's not quite true. Let me take a look at the leg again for a second. No, it maybe should be. Right, because we have that coming in from... Sorry. Got to think this through. We have that coming in from inputs. The length of the bone should be defined by the information coming in from the inputs. So the fact, let me just check on what the leg's doing about that. That's where it's ultimately coming from, flowing through the spine. But what's controlling the length of this joint? Because that's the thing that's wrong. There is a very simple solution to this, but I don't really want to do it because I want to know why this isn't working. So we've got hip overshoot. It is being put in the space. No, the hip is being put in the space of hip overshoot. Sure, makes sense. It's decomposing the matrix. Oh, it's assuming that they aim. Right. Which they in fact do not do. So here's the issue, right? We've got these things that are sort of inside the body, right? They are constrained, and what this is saying is that the length of the bone is being controlled by essentially the distance between. Yeah. We're putting the hip. I mean, we do this everywhere, right? But remember that the assumption that we have usually is that things that are is that the guides must align, or this technique doesn't work, right? We assume the guides must align, and the reason why they must align is because when we are asking, okay, this thing in this thing's space, like where does it go? What is its physical position, right? Because in this case, we break them down to what is the location, like the length of the bone, and then the next joint orient of the bone. So the question is, what's the So in order to get that length and the next joint orient doing something reasonable, the bones actually have to align with each other. Because we are getting the distance in terms of translation, but then the orientation is in the space of whatever it was, like whatever the next joint up the chain is, right? So we do that, we decompose, We get the distance between that translation and 0, i.e. what the length of the bone should be. And then we get the orientation. No, maybe that should work. Right. No, not if... Yeah, okay, here we go. Not if this translation, this output translate, has values in things other than x, right? Because x is effectively, when you're looking at things like matrices like this, like Maya joints, right? X is essentially the length of your joint. In this case, that's not the case, and therefore things don't line up properly, right? Because what we're getting from this constraint doesn't necessarily aim at the next thing down the chain in terms of how the inputs function, right? So there's a variety of ways we could choose to handle this. We could make it do so, but that adds some complexity that I don't particularly want. Instead, I'm going to do something that you can do in Contour, but what you cannot do in, in a variety of other contexts that would require sort of like a chain that acts in a specific way, which is to say I can break the chain. And I'm now going to do something different about how this chain gets moved around. I actually don't even need, I think, to have this special group for it. But I'm going to keep the group because it makes things a little bit simpler. This group is going to be called, well, I still need to rename some of this stuff. But what we are going to do is instead of relying on the chain behavior, we're going to take this group and drive it directly. So, because it is now no longer part of the hierarchy, it doesn't care what this is doing, right? So drive it directly off the inputs, which in this case is going to be very simple. And again, in this particular case, I am going to do it manually because it's so simple. What we are doing is to say we want to grab the hip, world space transformation. We can just leave it as it is. All we need is a single decompose node. I think this will work. Always got to do shear. So this should still function in the way that we would expect. Yep, everything is doing as one would hope. This thing can still be translated, which is a thing we want to allow, and that's fine. I do want to hide this stuff, though. Must have forgotten that. And here's what this should mean. Yup. That is doing what it should do. Let's turn off the components. Oh, sorry. Let's turn off the guides. And just see the components. Yup. There's a little bit of weird deformation here we'll fix in a second. But basically, this is the correct behavior. So what's going on there is... Well, let's actually make sure it works when we... Yep. Oh dear. No, it did not. That is clearly incorrect. All right, let me just look at that for a second. So what should be going on here is that it's outside. Ah, those things are still inside the anchor, and they should not be. Right. Because at this point, they're having their transformation driven directly by the spine. If they're inside the anchor, they're going to get double transformed. Which is why doing this works, and doing this would work, and doing this does not, because that's driving the anchor. So what we want to do is to say that these are relative to... Actually, relative to world space is what they need to be. So where's our thing here? Yeah, this needs to go in world. All right, let's see if this did it. That's fine. How about this? And that's fine. There we go. Okay, so we now have sans fingers, which we did not, in fact, get to. We have a completely working rig here. This character has all of the features that we've built in. It is fully posable. Let's make these both FK, I guess. It has all of the features that a contour rig normally has, that sort of come for free with contour, like the stretchy IK. It also has stuff that would be built in, directly, like the reverse foot that doesn't come for free with contour, and the behavior is exactly as one would expect. And we have now built this rig from scratch. I'm gonna sort of ignore the fingers, and there's a bit of cleanup, as I'm sure you can tell. That oh yes, worth noting. The last thing we need to do before we can call it like kind of ready is to remove the contour shape nodes. Oh, I locked. Right. You would do this after. Yeah, okay. Can't do that if things are currently referenced. So as a published step, I mean, this won't be an issue for our own purposes. Import objects for reference. The system will handle this. There we go. And, if you subtract all the time we spent fixing all of the issues that I introduced like a complete idiot, then we rigged this character extremely quickly. And fingers wouldn't really have been that much more time. I just don't really want to deal with it right now when, I wasn't sure if things were going to go perfectly, and indeed they didn't. But yeah, I mean, we've got a character here, and we built it with our component system that you kind of saw me build for the most part. So I think that is where we are going to leave it with our componentized rigging stuff unit, I guess. I think that we sort of got across a lot of the things that I thought were important about componentized rigging, albeit not in a very succinct way. Honestly, as a teaching tool, this did not work out quite as well as I would have hoped. Largely because the past few months I've just been dealing with like a million things at once, and I didn't really devote the time to it that I think would have made it like a more effective way of communicating things. So what I think we're probably going to do now is play it by ear a little bit about how we're going to do things with the streams. I'm sure we will be doing more streams in the future. I'm not going to put an exact date on them. We have a lot of stuff happening right now that, again, I wish I could announce some of this stuff, but I can't. We will definitely have, 1.1 is going to get released, hopefully soon. Obviously, there's still some stuff to work on, but it's got a bunch of important features such as, certainly the body plan stuff, but we've also improved a variety of other aspects of Contour. I don't really want to go into that right now since it hasn't been released, and better not to make promises when you haven't yet announced something. But
I do think it would be worthwhile to do a stream when we release one.
Oh, absolutely, yes, definitely. Like that's kind of what I've sort of been thinking. Actually, is it's like doing this thing where I attempt to stream every week has been tricky for me, to be honest. But I think that doing a big stream when we release something, that's potentially a really valuable thing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, and turning my attention a little bit more to some of the stuff you were talking about, Matt, right? Like we need training, we need more videos, right? We need a lot of stuff to sort of get things across.
Yeah, I think your time might actually be better spent there than on the streams. Yeah. I don't think we should stop streaming.
Oh entirely. No, I certainly don't. I don't think we should. To people who have followed us along with this particular unit on componentized rigging, hopefully you guys got some like interesting ideas out of it. You definitely saw me fumble around a whole bunch because I wasn't super well prepared with any of this stuff, but that is also part of the experience of rigging. You like that's definitely like that's a lot of the day to day of like, you know, making rigged characters work. So it's not, you know, like, and lots of people already know that, right? But it's not the end of the world to sort of see some of that. But I definitely do maybe want to move on to things that are a little bit more, scripted might not be the right word, but like prepared for, right? I do feel like this went on for quite some time without getting to the point. And the point, I think, is a really important one, but it was a little bit obscured in sort of the way that I ended up approaching this. But, you know, whatever, you live and learn. And, you know, I don't know when our next stream is going to be exactly, but you guys will know. We'll probably make more noise over it, actually, than we have on the previous streams, because it's going to be a less frequent occurrence. I can announce it weeks ahead of time and stuff. That'll give me some time to, you know, make sure I actually have my ducks in a row. And, you know, certainly you can look for the release of 1.1 soon. And also other things that I can't talk about. So, you know, you'll be hearing from us. Thank you for following us, and like and subscribe, and you'll all, you know, lots of cool things are going to happen.
All right. Thank you very much, Raph, and thank you all for coming by.
Yep. All right. Bye.